Welcome back to the channel for the 5-Minute Wednesday. Today I want to talk about Brazil, not because of a vacation in Rio, but because this is a market, as a stock market, that's completely underpriced and is about to do what we saw in the United States. And so many people, that I talk to look at the stock market in the US and other markets and say, well, everything's pretty expensive. The reopening trade already happened. I missed the boat. But Brazil is really there and is about to do what we saw in the United States. And so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the reasons why I believe that's about to happen in Brazil, but then also tell you how best to play this. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on the background and context in Brazil, because typically when I discuss Brazil with people in the market, there are two types of pushback. One is on the politics and the other one is on COVID-19. When it comes to politics, Bolsonaro clearly, has been running the country for a while now, and he's done a disastrous job when it comes to COVID-19. But the political pushback that I'm hearing is with regards to Lula, that is now out of prison. Rumors are starting that he might potentially be running for president again. Obviously, he's very much on the left, and so that would not be great for the economy. But the presidential election is not until October 2022. And so that's still way too far for the stock market to even care about, for this to be on the radar for people to be potentially affected by. The second pushback is on COVID-19, and clearly Brazil is one of the most affected countries around the world. Now India is much more in the press, obviously, because of the disastrous situation there. But when you inspect the situation of COVID-19 in Brazil a little closer over the last month or two, I want to demonstrate this on a couple of charts here. So if you look at this first chart over the last year, you see in blue, at the bottom of the chart, that's the daily confirmed cases. But when you look at the red lines here, that shows you how many vaccines have been administered in the country. And at this point, Brazil vaccinated more than 40 million people. That's out of a population of about 213 million. So 40 million is a significant number. And they're at about 1 million vaccinations per day right now. So that's a significant amount of vaccines administered each day and kind of on par with the United States relative to population, right? They are slightly behind in time, but they are vaccinating as much as we are in the United States. And so when you think back to, the vaccination campaigns around the world, when Israel was, at the stage where they vaccinated a significant amount of their population, the cases really plummeted shortly thereafter. In the United States, we're about to see that. We're a few weeks away from really seeing a large decrease in new cases and obviously people dying. But by the way, Israel this week had a first day since the crisis started where nobody died of COVID-19. So Brazil is getting there very quickly. And by the way, I saw the news today, they refused the Sputnik delivery from Russia, which obviously didn't make the Russians very happy. The second chart I want to show you here is the correlation between the local currency, the Brazilian real versus the dollar. That's the orange line, relative to the blue line, which is the confirmed COVID-19 cases. And you see, typically you would see a lot more weakness in the local currency. And really, if you look all the way to the right of the chart, you see that we are turning the corner. The blue line, the COVID cases are beginning to decrease. And then the local currency is very correlated there and has been kind of on the weaker side, understandably so, just like the stock market, which is severely underpriced. So those two things, this pushback, I think we'll see the market get over this and over the next month or two as the country starts really to emerge out of COVID-19. Now you might be saying, okay, Martin, I believe you. I think Brazil is underpriced. I think Brazil is going to emerge from COVID-19 shortly and the stock market is going to skyrocket. Well, how do I invest? Well, I'm glad you're asking. Because when you look at Brazil as what industries dominate Brazil, right? You have obviously the commodities industry, companies like Petrobras and Vale, and the financial sector. But for anybody that doesn't live in Brazil, when people want to play Brazil as a market as a whole, typically what people buy is an ETF called EWZ. I'm going to throw the Bloomberg page here, the description page for EWZ here, but whenever you see people talking on CNBC or Bloomberg about Brazil, they throw up EWZ on the screen because EWZ really represents about 85% of the stock market in Brazil. Now, this is a $6 billion market cap. So whoever invests in Brazil typically has exposure to EWZ. Now, the interesting thing about EWZ, when you look at the performance of the last 5 years, so look at this chart here for the last 5 years, and you see that we are still 25% below the peak where we were pre-COVID in early 2020. So that's 25% that we still have to make up to get to that level that we have seen early 2020. When you compare this to the S&P 500, and I'm going to throw the chart here on the screen too, you see we are 25% above that peak, right? So that's what I'm talking about, on a relative basis, which market is cheap and which market is expensive. When you're looking at the S&P 500 in the United States, that's a relatively expensive market, right? What are you hoping for here? 4,400, 4,500 by year end? When you look at EWZ, which really represents the Brazilian stock market, you are still 25% below where you were a year ago when COVID-19 hit, right? So when the country really starts emerging from this, once we vaccinate a large amount of population, there's a huge amount of catch-up to play. Now, when you look at the holders, right, this is a page showing you what's actually in this EWZ index. So EWZ, really 40% of EWZ is energy and materials. But company number one in this index, in this ETF, is Vale, obviously a huge player in mining in Brazil. If you know a little bit about commodities, about mining, the big countries, obviously Australia, Canada, United States, but Brazil is huge in when it comes to iron ore, when it comes to metals. So Vale just announced results yesterday, which were good, and by the way, a huge part of their income comes from iron ore. So again, look at this chart here. This is the chart for iron ore and what iron ore has been doing, hitting new highs lately. But if you look back at what's in this ETF, so the top holders, Vale for 18 or 19%, then you have a couple of banks, you have Itau and Bradesco. The financial sector in Brazil, whenever you read an analysis on the financial sector in Brazil, that's a hugely profitable sector. Financials make a lot of money in Brazil. Company number 4 is obviously Petrobras, right? Petrobras is, again, in oil and gas, a giant in the energy sector. So you have a huge exposure to, the main sectors when it comes to what Brazilian economy runs on. And the final chart I want to show you here is this correlation between the Bloomberg Commodity Index and this ETF I've been talking to you about, this EWZ in blue. You see this huge gap between the performance over the last couple of months or 3 months since December, right? Which is, again, this gap is going to narrow as soon as Brazil emerges from COVID-19 and EWZ obviously catches up to where commodities are trading. We're talking about this commodity super cycle. My last video was about exactly that, the energy stocks and how energy stocks are playing off this huge commodity super cycle catch up and the reopening trade, US growing 7-8%, China obviously catching up as well, and all the EM will catch up in the second half of 2021 and then 2022. So that's it for a little update on Brazil. Again, this is a huge opportunity for those that missed the boat on the reopening trade over the last 6 months. If you missed the boat on all these stocks that did very well in mostly developed markets, in the United States, in China to some degree, in Europe, Brazil is very, very underpriced and is going to catch up as soon as the market starts focusing on what is coming after COVID-19. All right, make sure you give a like to this video. That's going to help the YouTube algorithm. As always, subscribe to this channel if you enjoy this type of content, and I'll see you in a few days.